Heading into day 3 of round 2 in the Phonix Festival Tournament, we've got another group of matches in the singles, doubles, and teams categories. As always, linked in the description below are all of the Google Forms where you guys can go and vote for who you think would win in each match and give your reasoning as to why. Whether it's due to experience, weapon, semblance advantage, etc., a reason does have to be given for each of your choices. Now, our first match of the day in the singles category is Cinder Fall versus Ilya Amatola in the ocean and ice biomes. Two very skilled opponents, and Cinder is not going to be using her maiden magic, definitely leveling the playing field quite a bit. Though she was a very skilled fighter, as we saw in Volume 3, she was able to take on Amber alongside Emerald and Mercury. Though Amber was more of an inexperienced maiden, Cinder was still able to put up one hell of a fight. Since then, she's really mostly relied on her maiden powers, but she's still a very capable fighter. Ilya, being a member of the White Fang trained by Sienna Khan, is definitely capable in her own right, one of the main enforcers that we saw in the White Fang that was stationed at Menagerie. She fights with her Lightning Lash, a whip that has a gun function, but more importantly, it has electricity dust in it, so when she whips someone, she can electrify whatever it is that she attacks, and can deal some pretty heavy damage with that. Now, with Cinder wielding her Midnight, a bow that is made out of metal, if it makes contact with Ilya's whip, it could be electrified, Cinder could end up dropping her weapon, and Ilya could gain an advantage. Cinder does have more long-range capabilities with her arrows. She seems to only carry about 3 to half a dozen or so, at least from what we could tell from Volume 3, as she burned her weapon of Midnight after that point, then going to rely on her maiden powers, but with her weapon of Midnight she could fire some arrows out. With her semblance of Scorching Caress, she can superheat the tips of the arrows and cause the ground to explode where the arrows land, so that could definitely play a factor in this fight, though fighting in the ocean and ice biomes, having a heat semblance, not exactly the most useful. Though one thing that Cinder definitely could do is in the ocean biome, she could possibly make a cloud of steam to give herself some cover, putting her hand, her Scorching Caress, on the water, superheating it so it could cause a heat explosion as the water expands and is heated up, so she could gain some cover, fire some arrows out of that Ilya wouldn't be expecting, and use the biomes to her own advantage. So that could be a way that Cinder could work the biomes to her advantage even without being in the desert biome. Overall though, I do think Cinder has more skill than Ilya, even if it's just slightly, as again, we're considering Cinder without her maiden powers, so I think Cinder would win this fight, but it wouldn't be an easy one for Cinder to win. Moving on to our second match, though, we have a match that I was kind of predicting a long time ago. Jean Arc versus Tyrian Callows in the forest and savanna biomes. Now, I was predicting this, I made a video on it a while back, because their semblances are so opposite from one another. Tyrian has the ability to disrupt a person's aura, and Jean, with his aura amp, can regenerate his own aura faster than anyone else as we've seen in the RWBY series, thanks to his large aura reserve, and, has the ability to gift aura to others rather than Tyrion's, which is just disrupting it or taking it away in a sense, though Tyrian doesn't actually absorb aura into his own aura. So this is kind of a polar opposite matchup, and when it would come down to it, it would kind of come down to skill. And at this point in the RWBY series, Tyrian is more skilled than Jean, especially with his 5 points of contact. He would be able to overwhelm Jean, though Jean does have the dust capabilities in his shield now, with the hard light dust extending the area that his shield can cover, and the gravity dust being able to knock Tyrian back as he would get into close combat, so it would all depend on how many bursts Jean could have with this gravity dust. And Tyrian is also quite adaptable, so after seeing it once, because he would be caught off guard for the first time, maybe the second, but probably not anymore after that, be able to dodge out of the way and work around the shields to get to Jean and start dealing damage against him. Now, Jean is getting a lot stronger as the volumes progress, so dealing some blows against Tyrian, if he is able to land a hit with Crocea Moors, then he would be able to deal some damage against Tyrian. I don't think Jean can take out Tyrian at this point in RWBY though, so I would give Tyrian the win, but Jean would still give him some trouble. But Tyrian would also be enjoying himself in the fight, so this is one we might actually see in the RWBY series, though I think it might be a couple volumes down the road, assuming Tyrian survives Volume 8, which, remains to be seen, but we'll have to wait until Volume 8 airs to see that. Moving on to our third fight, though, we have Pyrrha Nikos versus Sage Ayana in the Forest and Savannah biomes. Now, both of these characters, pretty much the skill level that we saw in Volume 3 is the maximum skill level that we've seen. We did get a bit of an expansion on Sage's character in Before the Dawn, but nothing that really adds to his combat style. We didn't find out his semblance, and Pyrrha has much more skill than Sage. She's won tournaments in Mistral and is a stellar student when she came to Beacon Academy, not to mention her semblance of polarity. If she's able to make contact with Sage's blade, then she would be able to manipulate it however she pleased, and any of Sage's attacks would miss beyond that point. So Pyrrha is definitely more skilled, and she would take the win in this match. I don't think it would be that much trouble for Pyrrha overall. Moving on to our fourth match, though, we have Velvet Scarlettina versus Vine Zeki in the Urban and Desert biomes. Now, there is a large skill difference between these two, at least when it comes to experience, because Vine is a graduated huntsman from Atlas, one of the members of the Ace Ops. He is one of the most skilled huntsmen in Atlas, but Velvet is the most versatile character we have seen in the entire RWBY series, with her semblance of photographic memory, being able to remember any combat style that she's seen, and her weapon of Anisadora, being able to create hard light dust copies of anything she was able to take a picture of. She can pick the perfect weapon for the situation. But Vine, we haven't seen him fight with his weapon of Thorn, only using his semblance of Aura Vines, so it would be interesting to see what weapon Velvet would come up with to combat this, because there isn't really anything that can just directly cut through Aura, so Velvet would have to use more of her acrobatics and being able to dodge out of the way of Vine's vines, and then be able to get close to him, deal damage, or just keep it a ranged fight even. Because she could copy weapons that have dust functions as well as long-range functions. She could copy Coco's Gianduja and just start firing rounds off at Vine so that, well, she could eventually wear down his aura. Being in the forest biome, and possibly even the savanna biome, if she's able to use the grass as cover, then she would have a lot of cover to start firing rounds from, make this a war of attrition, and I could see Velvet actually overtaking Vine. But if Vine is able to get close combat and is able to ensnare Velvet, then that would spell bad news for Velvet. I could see this going either way, but I do think Velvet's versatility might be able to win out over Vine in this case. And then we get to our fifth match, which is Robin Hill versus Callie Belladonna in the Geyser and Anti-Gravity biomes. Now, unfortunately for Callie, she is just outmatched in this fight. Robin Hill is a graduated huntsman from Atlas Academy, and, well, Callie is not, as far as we know. She doesn't really have many fighting capabilities, though she was able to take out Yuma in Volume 5, who was an assassin from the White Fang. She just doesn't have the capabilities to take on a fully fledged huntress at this time, and Callie would end up losing this fight. She might be able to deal some damage or block any arrows that Robin would fire off using, the serving tray that we saw her use in Volume 5, but Robin has explosive arrows, so even if they are knocked out of the way, they could still explode, deal damage to Callie. Robin could get close range, knock the serving tray out of her hands, so I think Robin just has overall versatility in this fight and would end up beating Callie. And then we get to match number 6, where it's Kallie's husband, Gira Belladonna versus Nadir Shiko in the Geyser and Desert biome. Now, Nadir does have ranged capabilities. He has a gun that transforms into a sword, so if he kept this long range, he could win out against Gira, but Gira is a very ferocious, fast fighter for his size, but very close combat, so he has to get close to Nadir to be able to deal damage to him. We don't know if Gira fights with a weapon, only using his claws and just straight up brawling with opponents, so he would have to get close to Nadir. If Nadir let him get close, Nadir's screwed, but if Nadir can keep it at a ranged battle, he would have the advantage. Now, Nadir could also use his sword to try to combat Gira close range, but that would be a fairly bad idea. I could already see a scene play out where Gira just simply grabs Nadir's sword and then punches him with his other hand, completely disarming him, throwing the weapon away, and then just relentlessly pounds Nadir. Again, poor Nadir, he doesn't really seem to have good matchups in these fights, but I do think that Gira would win out overall. Being the leader of the White Fang, he has more experience than Nadir in combat, leadership, etc., so I think Gira would just win. And then we move to match number 7, which is Yang Xiaolong versus Nolan Porfirio in the lava and ocean biomes. Now, as far as we know, Yang does have much more experience than Nolan, being trained by the Ace Ops, and with her gauntlets, she could fire from long range because she has the shotgun capabilities, as well as, in Volume 7, she has the remote detonation capabilities. So she could work that to her advantage, use the lava biome and the reactive dust that would be present in it to create some chain explosions and possibly use that against Nolan. But if Nolan was able to force this match into the ocean biome, well, he does fight with a cattle prod that has electricity functions with it. So this could end up similar to how Neptune electrocuted the entirety of Team Indigo and won that match for Team Sun in Volume 3. So Nolan could work this to his advantage if that is the case, but other than that, Yang might have to get close combat and fighting against someone with a cattle prod and could send however many volts of electricity through her body. This could work either way, though letting Yang get close combat, even if Nolan is able to electrocute Yang, if she's able to fight through that, that would reduce her aura, deal damage to her, and then if she activated her semblance, Nolan would be sent into next week. So I think Yang has the advantage in this fight, though it could be worked for an advantage with Nolan depending on how it played out. More often than not, though, I think Yang would end up winning. And then we get to our 8th fight, which is Wyshny versus Neptune Vasilius in the Geyser and Desert biomes. So immediately, Neptune not going to go anywhere near the Geyser biomes because, you know, water, but if he is able to get over his fear of water, he could use his semblance of water attraction and work that to his advantage, but Weiss has so much versatility with the dust that she's already used to using, with her Myrtanaster, her summoning, etc. This would be very hard for Neptune to combat. I don't know if Weiss would be able to actually activate her summoning, though, if Neptune didn't really give her the chance to do so, as he does have a railgun as part of his weapon, Tryhard, so he could use that and try to keep Weiss from summoning, from focusing on it, and Weiss could use her glyphs of momentum to move herself around the arena. If it came to a straight-up fight, Weiss not using her summoning and having her fight against Neptune, then I think Weiss wins out in skill, because we've seen her fight and train get a lot stronger since Volume 3, whereas Neptune, we haven't seen him improve that much. Again, we did get his semblance and a bit more of his character in Before the Dawn, but overall not really much improvement on his fighting style. So I think Weiss would win in this one, though it wouldn't be an easy fight if Neptune is able to keep her off the summoning. But a little bit of revenge for him hitting on Team Indigo, I guess, right at the beginning of their match in Volume 3. And then we move on to the doubles category, where we have in our first match Lai Ren and Roman Torchwick versus Qrow Branwen and Pyrrha Nikos in the ocean and urban biomes. And this fight is full of a lot of quick fighters. Roman on the blocking, parrying, and counterattacking, Lai Ren just being essentially a ninja, being able to move around the battlefield very quickly with his Stormflower, the versatility that it offers, as well as the cables that have been added to that in Volume 7, so if he's able to latch on to anything in the urban biome, he can maneuver around there very quickly. Pyrrha being a very fast and skilled fighter. On top of that, Qrow being, well, Qrow, a member of Team Stark, he is an extremely fast fighter as well, so this match would be close combat and very quick to both start and probably end, because there is a massive skill difference between these characters. Now, I would argue that Lai Ren, as of Volume 7, is close to the skill level of Pyrrha that we saw in Volume 3. Yes, the animation and choreography was different in Volume 3, and Pyrrha was vastly outclassing everyone else in her class, but with the training that Ren has had from the Ace Ops, he is now a fully fledged huntsman, he would be on a closer skill level to Pyrrha, and I would argue that they're relatively equal. But Roman Torchwick, comparing him to Qrow Branwen, not so much. Qrow could easily outclass Roman. Roman would be able to parry, I think, quite a few hits from either Pyrrha or Qrow, but he would be overwhelmed more so than he was in the fight that he had against Sun and Blake in Volume 1. He's still a very skilled opponent, but Qrow and Pyrrha, just with the amount of skill and experience that they have, they would end up overwhelming Lai Ren and Roman Torchwick. Unfortunately, as much as I don't want to see Roman or Ren knocked out, I think they would end up losing this fight. And then in our second match of the doubles category, we have Maria Calavera and Mero Amon versus Yuma and Yatsuhashi in the Forest and Geyser biomes. Now, Maria Calavera, extremely skilled, being the legendary Grim Reaper with her semblance of preflexes, her weapons of life and death. She gets close combat very quickly and starts dealing a lot of blows against opponents. Now, Yatsuhashi we have seen in the past struggle against fighters that are faster than him, as he is more of the heavy damage dealer of Team Coffee. So if he can land a hit against an opponent, they're probably going down, but he needs to land that hit first. Maria would be able to overwhelm him with numerous attacks against him, and it would be difficult for Yatsuhashi to defend. Yuma would be able to take to the air and keep an eye out on the battlefield and possibly attack from the air, but I don't really think that would go that well, as we already saw how he faced off against Marrow and simply stay. If he was in the air, he would drop from the air, and that would deal pretty heavy damage against him. I think Maria and Marrow are a more cohesive team versus Yatsuhashi and Yuma, and more geared towards, you know, fighting against two opponents. They would be able to take out Yatsuhashi, then deal with Yuma in the air, or however it worked out. I think Marrow and Maria just have the advantage in this fight overall. And now we get to the teams matches, with our first match being a little bit of a rematch from something we saw in Volume 3. We have Team Coffee, that is Coco Adele, Fox Alistair, Velvet Scarlettina, and Yatsuhashi Daichi, versus Team Burns, which is Mercury Black, Roman Torchwick, Neapolitan, and Emerald Sustrai, and they are fighting in the Geyser and Savannah biomes. Now in Volume 3, we saw Cinder manipulate the brackets of the Vital Festival Tournament so that Emerald and Mercury faced off against Coco and Yatsuhashi. And we saw how well that went, because Mercury, being a much faster fighter than Coco and Yatsuhashi, was able to make quick work of them. And once Yatsuhashi was knocked out, when there was one opponent left, Emerald was able to use her semblance to confuse Coco and rattle her a little bit, and then they were able to make quick work of her as well. But it would go extremely differently when it's the entirety of Team Coffee versus Team Burns, because Velvet and Fox are the faster fighters of Team Coffee, and they would be able to match off against Mercury at the very least. Whichever one of them did, they would be able to match his fighting capabilities. I think Fox would make a good match for Mercury. Yes, Mercury was raised as an assassin from a very young age, but Fox, fighting in Vacuo, very harsh environment, he was fighting from a young age as well. I think this would be a fairly good matchup. Emerald, with her semblance of illusions or hallucinations, would only be able to affect a single opponent at a time, or a single target at a time, so she could rattle someone on Team Coffee. Probably Velvet would be the logical choice, as she would be the most versatile, one of the more quicker opponents, and taking her out first would give Team Burns the advantage, but that would be difficult to do with Fox's TeamSpeak, being able to snap anyone out of the illusions, and also being able to, you know, sense where any opponents are, so get around Neapolitan's overactive imagination and any illusions that she threw up, as Fox would be able to tell everyone through his telepathy where opponents are, where they're located, and sense them wherever they may be. So Neapolitan semblance wouldn't be that effective, similarly with Emerald's, and then Roman Torchwick would be an interesting opponent for Velvet, actually. With the amount that he is able to parry, block, and counterattack, even against multiple different fighting styles, fighting against both Blake and Sun in Volume 1, I think Velvet, with the numerous different weapons and fighting styles she could pull out, would make a good match for Roman, and that would be a fairly even fight with a lot of back and forth combat. But with Mercury Black facing off against like Fox, and then Yatsuhashi being able to deal heavy damage whenever, if Neo, for example, got a little bit too comfortable behind one of her illusions, and Yatsuhashi was able to slam down an attack near where she was, sent out a shockwave, that could end up disrupting Neo. But Neo is one of the most skilled fighters we have seen in the RWBY series thus far, so this would be a very difficult fight. I would honestly think that Team Coffee might end up winning against Team Burns, except for Neo. Neo being such a skilled fighter, I think she would be able to overtake Velvet, be able to work around Yatsuhashi fairly easily, possibly Coco as well. Coco would be the more ranged combat, Yatsuhashi the close combat damage dealer, dealing heavy damage against opponents, Velvet and Fox being the speedy fighters, picking up any slack wherever there may be, so this would be a fairly difficult fight to call. Team Coffee has a lot of cohesion and versatility with their team, and Fox's telepathy definitely helps them out overall, so I think Team Coffee overall might win this, but I could easily see Team Burns winning as well. So let me know on this one what you guys think down in the comments below and through the voting. And then we get to our second match of the teams category, which is Team Silver. created by Mark Zhang. Links in the description below to each of the trailers for the characters in Team Silver, consisting of Simon Magistus, Lycan Arcadia, Vela Moaja, and Regora Cinerum. They are fighting against Team Midnight, which is May Marigold, Joanna Greenleaf, Robin Hill, and Fiona Time, and they are fighting in the lava and desert biomes. Now, Team Silver is a very skilled and very cohesive team, covering a lot of different categories. They have the close combat fighter, Lycan Arcadia, and the long-range fighter, Vela Moaja, as she is a very skilled sniper, though fighting in the lava and desert biomes, not really too much she can use to get a vantage point, though in the desert biome we did see in Volume 3 that there was a giant rock outcropping. If Vela was able to get up there with her binding glyphs, shoot a single bullet up there, and use her binding glyphs to be able to launch herself up, she could have a hell of a vantage point and start being able to snipe opponents. But if May Marigold was able to use her semblance of invisibility field, she could hide herself and Vela wouldn't really have a great target. But there's also Regora Cinerum being able to summon the familiar with her semblance, and also Simon Magistus being able to create all of the different dust weapons, and with the tornado lance that he's able to create, I could easily see him, even if May is using her invisibility field, being able to gauge where they might be, at least where they went invisible, throwing that lance out there, disrupting May using her semblance, making them all visible, and then Vela could snipe them off, or Lycan could rush up and start dealing damage against them. Regora could use, you know, her familiar, her weapon on top of that. Team Silver, I think, just has more versatility and more skill when it comes to combat versus Team Midnight, the Happy Huntresses, as they seem more geared towards, you know, sneaking and thieving, you know, Robin Hood style semblances. Fiona Time's semblance of, you know, the palm pocket, being able to store things in her aura, wouldn't really come into play in this fight unless she's able to store things in there, launch them outwards, store dust, for example, and use dust versatility, but we haven't seen her be able to do anything like that, or even launch an entire military-grade truck from her aura to slam into an opponent, because I'm pretty sure that would break someone's aura, but we don't know if she can launch things out with, you know, accelerated velocity or anything like that, so we wouldn't know about that. Joanna Greenleaf doesn't have her semblance, or we don't know what her semblance is, so it wouldn't play a factor in this fight. And Robin Hill, her semblance of lie detection wouldn't really play a factor here either, so unfortunately Team Silver just has a sheer advantage over Team Midnight, and in my opinion would end up winning this fight. So hopefully you guys are enjoying these matches in the Phonix Festival Tournament, and if you want to keep up with the tournament, see the results as they are coming out, see the different matches as the tournament progresses, make sure to subscribe, join the Guild of the Eternal Flame, also keep up with all the different music polls that are going on and the other RWBY content that's coming out alongside it. Tweet me at PhoenixKnight7, join our Discord server, linked in the description below as well, and I'll see you guys in the next video.